In the beginning, the world was a desolate wasteland. Life there was kill or be killed, dog eat dog, man against man. However, in the 4th century, one generation of the human race, the weakest of races on the planet, gave birth to 6 enigmas. Scattered throughout the world were children born with faint glows, with a strong sense of power flowing through them. The kind that made no man, beast, nor force of nature even try to harm them, for fear of the consequences. These 6 men and women were born with knowledge bestowed upon them from the gods, in hopes of fixing the shattered groups of humanity. These 6 became the world's first users of magic, and the most powerful that would ever come. In hopes of uniting the world, these mages were born and raised in 6 different parts of the earth, and had knowledge of how to channel that area's natural power. In the northern mountains, brimming with craters and volcanoes, was born Azar. She held the power of using the flow of magma and fire to create strong, structured power. She could blow back boulders, control volcanoes, and use the energy from landslides and eruptions to convert into a power source as the mountains grew into a thriving civilization in her name, which was as brute and uncaring for trivials as the harsh landscape around it. The next was Dallas, born on islands in the southeastern sea. He was able to use the tide and waves to bring about power he needed for diplomacy between the humans and the creatures of the deep. Able to create tidal waves with ease, he made peace in a land that was fraught with conflict, creating a civilization built on agreement and unity. In the eastern desert, Karak was born into an area that struggled to find food, water, and shelter from both storms and beasts. So, Karak used the power from the extreme winds and shifting sands to form a civilization built on survival. Instead of one structured government, there were many different tribes with their own leaders that followed him in order to ensure everyone was looked out for. The plains of woodlands in the western region became home to Vitus. He was able to draw upon the powers of the minerals of the fertile earth and the wind through the grass and trees to create a civilization thriving on agriculture. Able to control grass and the ground, a peaceful land was created, protected from the creatures of the forest. The southwestern part of the world, however, was infected with a nasty bog, filled with nothing but death and decay. As Morvis grew older, she took power from the bubbling and sinking earth, as well as the death that caused it. This mage had immense power, and used it to reanimate the dead from her small tribe. As such, a civilization of dead, in which the live were on top, was formed. Finally, located in the central part of the world, was the only area to already have formed a civilization. An expansive city had formed, able to thrive due to a river enriching the soil and providing water, as well as a nearby forest for food and material. There was even a land nearby that they had turned into a mine, so when Celestia, the favorite daughter of the gods, came down, it wasn't to save the land. It was to bring technologies and advancements to society, spread evenly from this civilization to the others. Throughout their lives, these mages built the foundations of kingdoms, empires, and tribes. However, they were the children of the gods. They were still mortal. Soon, Celestia realized their lifespan wouldn't be enough, and that the magic they possessed was needed for these nations to further progress. So, she met with her siblings and devised a plan. They would tell their people to erect enormous pillars with a fork at the top to hold magical power. It was there that the mages would convert themselves into magical energy, stored by the pillars, that will last their people an eternity. Morvis and Azar resented the plan, but they couldn't do anything about it due to a divine protection placed on Celestia by the gods. If anybody took away her life force, all of the other first mages would lose their power, throwing the land into chaos. After many years, when the mages were on the last strings of their lives, the pillars were completed. Soon, civilizations watched as the mages scaled the pillars, came to the top, and, at the same time, became engulfed in light. These lights could be seen from anywhere in the world. To the north a dark red, the southwest a vibrant purple, the east a pale yellow, the southeast a bright blue, the western a deep green, and finally, one that made the others pale in comparison, a blinding white light in the central region. After a few minutes, the glows faded, but the lights in the middle of the pillars remained as a magic source. While the nations mourned, they decided to name their kingdoms and regions after the mages that changed the world order. These were known as the Azar Mountains, the Dallas Sea, the Karak Desert, the Vitus Plains, the Morvis Bog, and finally, the central region was simply known as Celestia. For generations, the people used the magic given to them to form new societies and progress. They learned to tame the creatures where they lived and work together in harmony with them. Many people managed to learn magic, and while even the strongest were nothing compared to the first mages, these new magicians allowed these to continue similar to how they had been. However, human greed is a powerful thing, and the peace wasn't forever. Many people wanted more, especially those that had the most. The people of Celestia and their ruler, Anubis, didn't like that the other nations had caught up to them, and that the only way they could stay on top must have had to have been to get the same power their former kind-hearted leader had possessed. Anubis, along with his soldiers, climbed the tower. The force of the magic made some fall to their end, but the king made sure his soldiers climbed in front of him, with the mages in the back casting protective spells on them. Eventually, they reached the top, and Anubis gleefully lost all control of himself and jumped straight into the magic. For the next 10 seconds, all anybody in the world could see was a blinding flash of light. Then, suddenly, it stopped. The people of each nation looked up at their pillars, only to see that their magic source was gone, completely vanished back into the air and the earth. Panic ensued, and they all sent envoys to the central kingdom to try and find answers. However, they never found the kingdom. Once they got there, all they found was a crater spanning 100 miles. Not a single trace of Celestia remained. The remaining 5 nations were now completely overwhelmed. They decided there was only one solution: to try to replace what they had lost. Each of these regions tried to use their mages to refill their pillars, but to no avail. After constructing new, smaller pillars, however, they managed to get a small magic source going. These tried to get as many as they could, but could only manage 4 with what their mages were capable of grabbing from the remnants of the old pillars. However, 4 small pillars was enough to keep the civilization running on a minimalistic scale, nothing compared to the prosperity that they once had. Azar was a nation that was used to getting rid of the weak to make room for the strong. Because of this, their nation was overextended for the amount of magical power they had left after the first pillar fell. However, their mages informed them that they believed they could use magic from others' pillars if they were to be destroyed. This made the leaders of Azar turn to the Korak, a group of tribes that had worked together to erect their 4 pillars, distributed them so everyone had power, and then split off again into their own separate ways. The Azar knew that since they weren't unified, Karak was the region that was the most vulnerable to invasion, so that's where their armies were sent. At first, Azar quickly overcame the first few tribes they met, but some survivors managed to escape and inform the others as to what was happening. They all decided to group up and unify under one banner to repel the invaders. Just that wouldn't have been enough, but unbeknownst to the other nations, the Karak and the Dallas had entered a trade agreement. The tribes needed water, and the people of the sea liked the exotic spices that the East provided. So once Dallas heard of this attack, they brought together their own people into an army and rushed to Karak's aid. Hearing of Azar's attack, Vitus quickly built up barricades and recruited defenses in case of invasion. This turned out to be a wise decision as Morvis, the land of the dead, heard about the chaos in the east and wanted more. The more death that happened in the world, the more powerful the magic and armies of the bog grew. Undead were soon marching their armies to the plains of the west with necromancers at their helm, killing anybody they came upon and adding them to their own ranks. In their eyes, if everyone was dead, the world would be a better place. The world was no longer 6 nations working together to bring peace. It was 5 factions working to try and have themselves go back to how it used to be. Now, the easiest way for a family to make a living was to join their faction's army or to become a mercenary, working for any side in battle. Now is the time to join a faction and lead them to victory in this war for power. Choose from the Karak, the desert faction, which relies on tactic cards to use their opponent's moves against them. The Dallas, the faction of water, that uses many smaller units working together to overcome strong foes. Azar, the starter of the war and the fire faction, which destroys its own cards to benefit itself and its units. Vitus, the defensive faction of the forest, that stays in the game by buffing itself and its unit strength. Or even Morvis, the faction of death that uses the discard pile as its primary tool in conquest, has the ability to mill opponents' decks. Power these up with mercenaries, the neutral faction of troops that supports any faction, but, however, they're not able to stand strong on their own. I hope you all are looking forward to the up-and-coming homemade trading card game, Pillars. Talk to you guys in the next video.